Hello friends and welcome back to House of Props. As you can see, this week's project is going to be the Second Age Gondorian shield inspired by the film trilogies and the shields released from United Cutlery. I didn't want to make it completely out of EVA foam because I was worried that over time it would warp or that it wouldn't be sturdy enough. And I ended up stumbling upon Chris Vernill's channel where he shows you how to take plywood and warp it to get an authentic shield shape. So jumping off of his idea, what I did was I ended up using plywood to make the inside of the shield, giving me the shield curve that I didn't have to worry about warping over time, and then completely coating it with EVA foam and adding all the details. When it came to finding images for all these details, I went scouring the internet like I do, trying to find images from United Cutlery of close-ups of the products. But I couldn't find anything that was super detailed. It was just all imagery that was on the sales site and they were sort of low res. So what I ended up finding were two amazing channels. Nerd of the Rings and the Cyber Hobbit both had unboxings for the second edition of this shield from United Cutlery. And their videos were amazingly helpful. They provided so many close-ups of the front, angles, the backs. Every little detail was covered in this thing and proved to be a huge help. So a huge shout out to Nerd of the Rings, the Cyber Hobbit, and Chris Vernell for their amazing videos that helped kick off this project. So let's get started. So there were two editions of the shield released from United Cutlery. The first edition was a wooden base with paint details, and the second edition was made of resin, which made it a lot lighter, and the tree and the stars were made to look as if they were applied applique. So there's been some debate back and forth about what was actually used in the film, and it seemed to land on that the first edition is what was used in the film, and the second edition was more of just a fixed up display unit. But I actually went to the prologue in the second edition of the film, and if you pause it right at the point where Sauron is entering the battlefield, you can note that there are spots on this soldier's shield that are picking up highlights, particularly around the top of the tree and the bottom of the metal bracing. So this is showing that the tree is actually an applique applied to the wood. So what I wanted to end up doing was making a combination of the two. I wanted the wood of my shield to look like the wood that's in the first edition, and I wanted the tree, the stars, and the crown to look like the applique that's in the second edition. I made my shield jig inspired by the one Chris made on his channel, except I used 2x4s to create the framing and cross supports. I made the jig frame 2 feet by 5 feet, but the best thing about Chris's design is you can adapt it to whatever size you need for your project. I used 3/4 inch plywood to create the curves, and I made their height 3 inches at the highest point. This will give shields a nice curve, and since they are mounted to the cross supports, allow me to make shields wider than the 2-foot framing structure in the future. The wood can simply hang off the edge. To make the shield, I'm going to use 1/8 inch Luan plywood. It's sturdy enough for this project and thin enough so we can get the desired curve. I'm using 2 sheets of the Luan cut to 24 inches by 48 inches. On the top piece, I traced the shield template just so I have an idea about placement and to make sure it's centered on the wood with enough room around it. To glue the 2 sheets together, I begin with the bottom piece and use some wood glue. This is the kind we use in the theater scene shop, and I know it works, so I'm going to stick with it. You want to squeeze out a good amount onto the wood, then take an old brush and spread out the glue. It doesn't need to be even, but you want to cover as much as possible. If not, the bond might not hold and your shield could come apart over time. While I do that, I would really appreciate it if you would click the subscribe button if you haven't already. It's free to you and will help this channel grow. Thank you. Once the bottom is coated with glue, align the top piece. Then the two can be placed onto the jig. To create the shape, I use some ratchet straps. I place them under the jig but in line with the cross supports. The hooks can be interlocked and the ratchet cranked to tighten. This will cause the wood to curve and take the shape of the 3/4 inch plywood underneath. I placed a strap at each of the cross supports and I left the shield to dry overnight before removing the straps and cutting out the shield shape. Next, I started to skin the shield with some 2mm foam. I began on the back by applying some contact cement to the shield, making sure to get even coverage. Next, I cut a piece of 2mm foam to the exact size of the shield template and coated it with an even layer of contact cement. To speed up the dry time, I use a heat gun to dry out the cement. If you use it just enough to take away the wet shine, you won't have to wait for it to air dry on its own. Then I aligned the bottom points together again on the back of the shield and firmly pressed the two together to make sure there weren't any air bubbles trapped under the foam. My reason for beginning on the back was so I could attach the handle before covering the front. To make the handle, I used 11 inches of a 3/4 inch PVC pipe. I left about 5 inches for the center grip, and I'm going to bend the pipe in 2 places on each side to get the desired shape. To bend the pipe, I use my heat gun and heat the pipe until it becomes soft. Then I press it between 2 pieces of wood to flatten it on the end, but I leave the middle circular like a pipe. Using some clamps to hold the wood tight, I then bend the pipe down at a 90-degree angle like so. Once it's cooled, it can be removed. Then half of the flattened bent area can be heated again with the heat gun and then bent back out to create a step shape like this. And the bending process can be repeated to the other end of the pipe as well. Once everything was bent and cooled, I trimmed the edges of the pipe to get a curved shape and pre-drill 2 holes on each side. Then align the handle so it's at an angle just offset from the center line of the shield. Then I attached it in place with some 1-inch wood screws. If you are left-handed, you may want to switch the handle to the other side. The tips of the screws will poke through the front of the shield, so I will grind these down with a disc grinder. This is the reason why I waited until coating the front of the shield with the 2mm foam. The grinder cut into the wood a little, but the foam should cover these areas without any problem. To cover the front of the shield, I cut out the shield shape but left an inch of foam around the outer lines. This will wrap over and cover the sides. This foam can be attached the same way to the front as the foam was on the back. Once attached, I drew in the plank lines. To do this, I align the stencil and using a ballpoint pen, punch a hole through the stencil at the end of the planks shown in the template. I did this at the top and the bottom and could then attach the dots with a yardstick. To then create well-defined planks, I'm using a knife tip in my wood burner and lightly slicing along the plank lines on the front and the back. You can see how it cuts the foam and the heat causes the cut to open up ever so slightly, creating a nice plank line. When you do this, make sure you work in a well-ventilated area and wear a mask because the fumes are toxic. Next, I took my Dremel and added a small sanding drum and started to freehand a wood grain texture. To make the texture look like the shield from United Cutlery, I'm barely touching the drum to the foam, just enough so that the edge makes a shallow groove in the surface. When carving wood grain, I always try to keep my marks random and not straight, and break them up so some are long and some are short and staggered. By keeping them random like this, it makes the texture look more natural. After carving the texture, I attach a 3-inch wide strip of 2mm foam to the rear of the shield in line with the grip to serve as a leather strap that helps support the shield on your arm. The length can totally be up to you. Create a strap that feels comfortable on your arm and allows enough room for not only your arm but also any costume pieces. Attach the foam with contact cement so the edges bend under like this. Then I added 4 6mm foam rivets to each end of the strip. These are purely decorative and provide no actual support, so make sure you attach them so they won't be knocked off. In my case, I use CA glue. I also use CA glue and some 2mm foam rivets to cover the screw heads on the grip. Zip Kicker will cure CA glue almost instantly, allowing for a quicker build time, and I also added a 3rd rivet to each side to add a little detail to the empty space. Then, using a 3/4 inch wide strip of 2mm foam, I wrap the grip so it can be made to look like leather once it's painted. And I almost forgot to wrap the overhanging foam from the front down the sides. Press this tightly so there won't be any gaps and trim away any excess. Then the Dremel can be used to smooth and blend the joint where the foam pieces meet. Then the metal support strips at the top and bottom of the shield can be cut out of 2mm foam using the template. They can then be attached to the front of the shield with contact cement. To make these strips look like hammered steel, I switch out the sanding drum for this round sanding tip. By pressing the ball into the foam, lifting and pressing and so on, you can create a hammered metal texture in your foam. It takes a few minutes to do, but the results are totally worth it. Next, I cut all the appliques out of 2mm foam and figure out their placement. Once I like where everything is, I trace the pieces so I would be left with some registration lines. Then all the pieces were attached with contact cement. I paid careful attention to the outlines I made earlier in order to avoid misalignment. The Tree of Gondor is a pretty intense design, but it is solid except for some cutouts around this area here. The rest will be inscribed and textured with a wood burner in a few minutes. This can be glued into place, but you'll want to leave a small gap between the tree and the middle star. Next, I attach the 2mm foam rivets to the top and bottom metal strips with CA glue. Then on the back I added some more so it'll look like the rivets holding the metal to the front of the shield come straight through the wood. The only thing is these need to be aligned with the ones on the front in order for the illusion to work. Now we can start adding detail to the front appliques. I begin by using the knife tip in my wood burner for all the lines in the design. Then for all the areas that need the recessed texture, I switch to this tip. I recommend if you buy a wood burner, get one with multiple tips because they will come in really handy. Using the tip, I press lightly onto the area enough to melt the foam but not enough to go completely through. We want the tree to look like it's been embossed when finished. Again, these fumes are toxic, so work with a mask in a very well ventilated area. At this point, the entire shield can be heat sealed with a heat gun. By wafting the gun over the surface of the foam, you can see how it slightly changes color. This is the foam slightly shrinking and sealing up its porous surface. This will allow it to better receive paint when we move forward. Once all the foam is heat sealed and has cooled back down to room temperature, the entire shield can be primed with some Plasti Dip. It adheres to the foam nicely and has enough flex to it that it is ideal for larping or cosplay pieces. Usually I'll apply 2 to 3 coats to make sure I have sufficient even coverage, and I let the Plasti Dip completely cure overnight before proceeding with any paint. Once dry, I take some metallic tin acrylic paint and a paper towel and pounce the areas that are meant to be metal banding and appliques. It doesn't need to be completely covered. By pouncing the paint, we help accentuate the texture already carved and burned into the foam. After the tin has dried, I repeat the process with some metallic silver. The silver is lighter in color and will help accentuate the texture and create variation in the paint surface. The front wood areas of the shield can be painted with a flat jet black. This will even out any spots of Plasti Dip that may be uneven and hide the shine of the Plasti as well. I try to brush following the wood grain just in case any brush lines are left behind. They will simply blend into the wood grain. The star attached to the center crown and the star appliques can be pounced with some metallic gold. Again, here we don't want solid coverage. Some of the base showing through is fine. It makes them look weathered and not so new. Next, I dry brushed some more texture onto the black. For this color, I took some white and mixed in a little burnt umber. This dry brush will create more texture similar to the first edition of the shield from United Cutlery, the one that was made of real wood. If you end up with some obvious brush marks showing, you can break these up by dry brushing some of the black back into these areas. Then I take some of the white burnt umber mixture and a small round brush and lightly add some spots along the plank lines so it looks like the black paint is flaking off from these areas. By varying the pressure on the brush, it'll create randomness that looks natural and not purposeful. Next, I take some of the metallic silver and touch up the surface of each of the rivets, just so they have a slight highlight and will look separate from the banding. To make the shield look like the United Cutlery ones, I make the rear of the shield look like raw wood. I begin by basing the wood with some Venetian red mixed with burnt umber. This is very red, but it is working as our base, and it will be toned down to a wood that has a slight red hue to it. Next, I took some burnt umber and dry brushed some long streaks like so. This was to add some variation to the reddish base and start to build up a woodish coloring. While that was drying, I then based the leather on the grip and the arm strap with some yellow ochre. This will be aged and weathered as we go along to resemble a dark, worn leather. Next, I mixed some raw umber and some burnt umber together, thinned it out with water to make a wash, and brushed this onto the rear wood. This begins to tone the reddish color into more of a brownish red. By using a thin wash like this, the two colors work together to create more depth in the paint job, both in texture and visual. I let the first coat completely dry, then came back and applied a second in various spots, not all over like the first. This yet again will add more visual interest to the paint job. At this point, to start to age the leather on the back, I thinned some burnt umber with some water and brushed this onto the ochre base. Then, using a crumpled up paper towel, I dabbed the surface to leave behind some splotchy covering. As this dries, it will darken slightly, like acrylics do, and begin to make the yellow ochre look like realistic leather. And the exact same process can be applied to the arm strap as well. After the umber has dried, I took some flat black acrylic and thinned it with some water. This doesn't get brushed over the entirety of the leather areas, just in spots where sweat, blood, dirt, and grime would naturally build. This same thinned black can be used to add some aging on the wood around where the grip and the arm strap attach. And with that last step, you have it! A second-age Gondorian shield inspired by the ones used in the film trilogy, made only by using some plywood, EVA foam, and a piece of PVC pipe. You can see here on the back how just a few colors have given us a wood color matching the ones from United Cutlery. I hope you enjoyed this build. Please give it a thumbs up. Let me know what you think of it. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments section below. I'll be happy to get to them. And if you want to make one of these shields for yourself, you can find a link to the template in the below description. And a huge thank you to Chris Vernell, Nerd of the Rings, and the Cyber Hobbit for your amazing videos that helped make this project come to pass. Again, I hope you enjoyed this build. Please give this video a thumbs up, share it with friends and family, subscribe to House of Props, and I'll catch you on the next one. And remember, if you are building any of my builds or using any of my templates, feel free and tag me at House of Props on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, because I would really like to see your fantastic work. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.